Welcome back to the Digital Healthcare Podcast. I have another great guest, Evan Kirstel. He has a robust experience. Evan, thanks so much for joining the program. I want to kick off with your career, so maybe if you could give a brief overview of some of the highlights, and we can jump in from there.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Nice to connect. Hope it's you're surviving winter there in Indianapolis better than I am
Barely.
here in southern New Hampshire. But yeah, much like yourself, I sort of came from and my origins in the enterprise IT and telecom world. So I worked for companies in tech before we started talking much about health tech, and came through the world of Oracle and Intel and startups in the sort of technology world, and over time of the last I'd say number of years have developed kind of a personal and professional fascination with health tech and digital health and wearables and the whole ecosystem that is health IT today.
How do you define health tech versus digital health? Because I think there's almost a branding confusion. Everyone calls it a little bit something differently. Do you have a clear distinction between those two terms?
Not really.
Okay.
I think it's semantics. It's like when you talk about mobile versus wireless. You know, you're talking about fundamentally the same thing. I think it's just context. Are you talking about a patient context? Are you talking about it in hospital context, or a, you know, maybe an enterprise or a data center? You know, that's the main difference. But fundamentally, I think we're on the same page.
So how much you mentioned telecoms was where you started, and I think you came from a sales background. How much did, or I guess, as you evolved into health or health tech, how much overlap were there between the two industries?
You know, traditionally, industries have been pretty siloed. I mean, if you work in aviation, you had your own five-letter acronyms and your own, you know, proprietary protocols and silos, and you didn't really look outside of your industry. And I think that was true and still is true in healthcare in many ways. But what's happening in the convergence of technologies is we're seeing a lot of crossover. And what's happening in wireless and telecom trends is as relevant in healthcare as it is in aviation or banking. And so there's a lot to learn across multiple disciplines and industry verticals, and you know, a lot of crossover of technologies and applications and use cases. And probably in your own experience, you know, you're leveraging a lot of things like cloud and storage and networking in a healthcare context that's equally as relevant in other, you know, industries. So that's what makes it an amazing time to be in technology.
Yeah, and my personal assessment of healthcare, where we're at now from a technical standpoint, it, so many sectors you've just seen get completely disrupted from digital technology, and healthcare really hasn't gone through that evolution in full, I don't think. Would you agree with that? And I guess the reason I assess that that's the case is that we lag behind, and in a lot of cases for good reasons. We're dealing with people and patients consuming things, so you just have to have that extra bit of caution. Um, so yeah, do you agree with that? And do you think what's the reasoning behind the lag in healthcare?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there are different standards of privacy and security, and you know, legal, uh, uh, you know, kind of compliance and regulatory frameworks that are in play. But I think those are also excuses for the lack of progress and innovation in many ways that we've seen in healthcare. The sort of artificial barriers that have been put up, and the you know, structural challenges that we have in many countries delivering care. So it's a unique environment, and it's fascinating to study and to observe how fast things are changing, because I think this industry is opening up, and it's the best time ever to be an industry observer, or a participant or an entrepreneur, or pick your role in the industry.
Yeah, and hopefully it soon in the future it'll be beneficial for patients to participate in, because right now that's not necessarily the case. And I'm wondering, what's your perspective on that? Because there's so much talk about the expensiveness of healthcare and the just the behemoth it is from a whether you look at it from a GDP perspective or anything like that. In telecom or some of those other sectors, it's kind of adapt or die, right? In healthcare, that's not necessarily the case. How have you seen the market shift, and do you think soon in the future that patients will see the technology benefit them from a cost and experiences perspective?
I'm cautiously optimistic, like you are, about patients adopting and using technology for improvement and self-care and making their lives better. I'm also eyes wide open in terms of the challenges and barriers. I think like you, I'm probably an early adopter of a lot of technology, from wearables to apps and digital health services of different kinds. And I think we're going to see, based on my experience, even this year at CES and a lot of the digital health innovation, explosion of use cases and devices. And we're seeing the marketplace will kind of open up and sort out a lot of the winners and losers. And I think a lot of the traditional incumbents who've been reluctant to change their practices or innovate will be carried along kicking and screaming. So I think, what's happening at Amazon and Google and elsewhere is kind of a big wake up call to a lot of the incumbent, let's say, players, without naming names, in the healthcare space. And ultimately, I think the patient will win as a result.
Yeah, you talked about CES, and I'll plug your LinkedIn and all the other social platforms you have. You put out so much content, and it's such relevant and insightful content. I thank you for putting that out, and I'd encourage everyone to go
Oh no,
check it
thank
out.
you. And I'd encourage everyone to engage on social media. I mean, despite all the dark and downsides of social, there's a tremendous opportunity to get out and educate and inform and learn and share and meet like-minded people. And I see that as the power of social ultimately that will overcome a lot of the security and trolls and nonsense that we see out there. But yeah, no, I love the content that everyone's creating, and what a great time to be an observer of this space.
Especially, I found especially LinkedIn is so valuable in terms of getting information. I think having that professional feel and vibe to it cuts out on some of the noise and crap that gets into a lot of the other platforms. And it's just such a great resource. Does that stand out for you as one that you go to more often than the others, or do you divide and
Yeah,
conquer?
LinkedIn is really my go-to destination every morning, and it is the kind of the future of media and media consumption and content creation. I mean, you have people blogging and sharing and commenting and engaging in an environment that doesn't have bots and trolls in a real way. And so I see kind of that as a great opportunity for us to model ourselves after, as we've seen on Facebook and even Twitter, how manipulative a lot of the bad actors have been. So yeah, no, I enjoy LinkedIn a lot, and I would encourage folks to create content. You can go there and blog and write and share and create video content, or join groups of like-minded folks in health and digital health, and it's an amazing community.
So back to CES then. I read your article. How do you go about separating hype from reality? Because I think when you go to those, especially CES, where you're looking quite a bit into the future, you see these things and look with awe and amazement, and then you kind of, at least me, I kind of step back and wonder what's going to make it to the market and what's going to really stick. How do you go about assessing that?
Yeah, the beauty is the market decides, and we can all watch as the market sorts out winners and losers and sort of sorts itself out. Um, I notice the hype and the the crazy inventions and stuff as the next person does. But I also noticed a lot of very practical products and applications and services at CES this year that I think will work themselves into your home and into your life in really meaningful ways. Whether it's an AI powered smart bed that learns your temperature preference and hardness and softness and tracks your sleep and other characteristics right through to an amazing array of wearables from someone like Philips for better sleep and sleep monitoring. These are all important things as we age and get older as a society. So I look for the practical use cases, and I saw plenty of those.
Do you start with your own kind of personal experiences as a basis?
Yeah, yeah, we're all digital health and health tech is very personal rather, based on our conditions, our maladies, our illnesses, diseases that we have, and maybe aren't too comfortable talking about or sharing. But increasingly, whatever that may be, whether it's physical or mental health or other challenges you face, genetic challenges or otherwise, there are people developing therapies for those, and some of them are quite simple, like activity tracking and and so forth. Others, might be pharmaceutical in nature, but there's some innovation happening, and it's really important to be educated and informed as a patient now, and to sort of take ownership of your own health, whatever that may be. And so that's what I'm really interested in, is kind of waking up to that realization.
Yeah, it's such an interesting transition time frame where when I started with digital health and it kind of came onto my radar and I started to research and learn more about it, I was really under the impression that, well, for me, it was coming from a tech background. It was so obvious that technology could benefit the healthcare industry. And I just naturally assumed all these big healthcare behemoths would see that opportunity and start to move in that direction. And it's kind of went the polar opposite, where much more the consumer side has gained quite a bit more traction. Where on the established side, um, you've seen some changes, definitely with EHRs, and there's a whole bunch of things in the works, and some are further along than others. But the consumer side is moving at a rapid pace, and I'm always excited about that because they take such a consumer patient driven approach, where in some of the more established, the business model and the structure of healthcare makes it quite a bit more complicated to really focus on the patient.
Yeah, and we see that trend in other areas where consumer experiences drive the expectation and the demand in business and enterprise and other applications. I mean, if you're on Google or Gmail or Google Calendar or Facebook or Twitter, you're used to, or Netflix, you're used to this amazing user experience and service. And then when you get into your enterprise or your business, or let's say your EHR, all of a sudden you're faced with a different reality. And so the software providers are having to reinvent themselves with a whole new focus on experience and user interfaces and design thinking. And so that's a good thing. And we've seen that play out in many different industries in many different ways.
Yeah, it's hopefully benefits all of us because all of us are going to have to touch healthcare at some point, right?
Yeah, that's the reality for better and for worse. And we all know family members, friends, coworkers beyond who are suffering from one or more conditions. And it really is empowering to see the devices and apps and services that are out there that can help. And particularly exciting for virtual care and telemedicine and telehealth, and what that might mean for extending care in meaningful ways to people.
make it
So a big fan of what's happening there as well.
make it a whole lot more convenient to access healthcare. That's for sure. Is it?
Convenient and fundamental. There are a lot of folks who aren't really able to access care in many ways, either for cost or convenience, and it's opening up new doors in ways that are important, not just in the U.S. but in developing countries. most of the world, you go from birth to death without ever seeing a doctor in much of the world. So this is a radical opportunity to kind of help humanity as a whole, not just us here in the States.
Absolutely. So when you talked about CES, is there anything that jumped out at CES or maybe any of the other conferences within the last year that really stuck out to you or had an impact on you?
Yeah, I mean, I like everyone else have been following the hype and excitement around machine learning and deep learning techniques, and I think we're beginning to see really practical applications of AI and deep learning, not to replace doctors, but to assist doctors in care and to help them with analysis, whether it's analyzing your patient data, uh, or searching for medical papers for potential options, or AI designing drugs now. So all of these use cases are very much here and now and today, and we're finally getting the data and the techniques and the platforms together to make this happen. So what an exciting time.
Yeah, hopefully it all comes together soon. That'd be a great turning point. So
Progress,
I want
exactly.
I want to go backwards. You started in sales, and the touch points in sales are quite a bit different from a lot of other experiences, whether that be developing or any sort of different types of experiences within healthcare. How would you characterize the common experiences you've had throughout your sales career? It's particularly focused on
Yeah,
healthcare.
I think sales and all its incarnations is about people, and it's a people to people kind of engagement. And so in this new world of patients and marketing and selling and digital, we're still about person to person. I mean, when I connect with you on social and I'm engaging you back and forth in a dialogue, that's very much a one-on-one conversation. Or when I'm at a trade show or an event, it really is about communication and collaboration. And so the best salespeople are that of that ilk. And sales, I think, really uh, essentially is a much better reflection of what social media is today. It is about having conversations and communicating and asking questions, and taking conversations that happen online into the real world. So I think it's salespeople. Good salespeople are generally also very curious, and that's helpful in what I do now as a kind of social digital practitioner. So sales is a good stepping stone into a lot of roles, and I enjoyed the people side of selling more than anything.
Did you
And I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned in sales, in healthcare, where the doctor-patient relationship is an important one, and how can you foster communication between and collaboration between people and even organizations to partner effectively. I think you learn a lot in sales from that.
Did you find that the role of a salesman in healthcare has changed over time? Where I'm sure the relationships and being curious, some of those principles always were there, but especially when as technologies evolved and come more to the forefront in healthcare, has that changed the way you engage differently?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the selling and sales now, it's no longer about cold calling and pitching. It's about in the best way. It's about being a consultant and finding solutions and asking questions and trying to be a consultative person. And I think that's where sales is evolving. I think for good. Um, Having said that, in this industry, there's still, particularly in pharma, a lot of practices around sales and marketing that are pretty ugly. So it has a way to go, in my opinion.
So then talk a little bit more about that because when I guess when I've experienced sales folks, one of the me being in industry it's hard for me to get out and really see what's happening and what's moving, where the innovation's happening, what new technologies, what new uh, processes are available, or how people are approaching problems in healthcare. The best salespeople have a really firm pulse on where the industry's at and where it's going. Is that a good assessment from your standpoint of what a salesman should be doing? And how do you personally stay on top of what's happening?
Yeah, it's the best salespeople now are really generating content and informing and educating uh, their potential clients instead of just selling. So they're offering solutions, they're solving problems. When you go to a big show like HIMSS in a few weeks, you'll see a lot of salespeople running around, um, but they're really trying to be helpful. And I think the industry, when it comes to sales and marketing, needs to shift from pushing products or solutions or the kind of advertising led approach to uh, you know being consultants and solution selling and educating your clients in the marketplace and providing facts and insights and data. And I think that's where the best salespeople and even marketeers can really shine, including on social media.
Yeah. Do you find a lot of your leads or the people you're interacting with, do most start online now?
There's this notion of a buyer's journey. So think about when you buy a server rack or something, you kind of educate and do your research online these days. I mean, the days of picking up the phone and just calling IBM are over. So you, as an IT professional, are doing pretty much 90% of your research and data gathering and data collection and pricing and questioning before you even talk to a sales rep or a vendor. And then when you're ready, you're kind of 90% of the way down the road. And I think that's true of a lot of things now. People are using social and digital and search and content to educate themselves, inform themselves, and develop opinions and make decisions. So it's increasingly important for companies, for firms, for vendors to keep in touch with those prospects through the buyer's journey and to educate them and to share data and positioning and insight and analysis that they have, so they kind of stay top of mind.
Yeah, the best example of that in my life is when I went to buy a car, because I did exactly what you just said and
Yeah.
search high and low to find the best deal. And I came to the car salesman thinking it's like the old way where you get to negotiate, you go back and forth a few times. And then they came back to me and said, no, 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 that's not how this works anymore. There's no wiggle room. If we leave wiggle room, people don't even show up. They go to the other place that has the lower price online.
Right. And so that's a new reality, and that's happening across many different industries and verticals. And never has there been more content out there available about whatever topic you're interested in, whether it's cars or health technology. And so on one hand, it's an opportunity, and there's just amazing to do the research. On the other hand, it's a challenge, right? I mean, people are confused. They're presented with almost infinite number of options, and how do you navigate through that? You really need a trusted advisor. You need really good consultant. You need insight or expertise. So the expertise and skills and knowledge and trust have become the new value add these days, whether it's in my business or yours in the IT side.
Yeah, and I just recently purchased a house, and that's one purchase I would never want to go it alone without some salesperson or a realtor helping me along the way. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of different pieces within the healthcare industry where you would never add a big huge software package like you would purchasing something on Amazon. So but I like the way you said it, how the salesman is really transitioning to more of a consultant to try to help right size and make sure you get the right fit.
Yeah, and this phenomenon applies throughout the industry or industries. I mean, think about your doctor. There's all this talk of replacing doctors with AI over time, and it seems just silly. I mean, the idea of trusting an algorithm that you know nothing or very little about is kind of nonsensical. Where AI really shines is in helping doctors and nurses and IT leaders, manage their work and to be more effective and to be less error prone, to be more efficient in their day to day work. And I think that's what I'm particularly excited about is sort of AI plus humans, not AI replacing humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel there will always be the need for some semblance of a salesperson? Particularly, the one I think of and most frequently in healthcare is purchasing software packages, and maybe you would have better insight into the gamut of what salespeople do across healthcare. But do you think there's always going to be that need for something, even with AI coming to the forefront?
Yeah, I think for a lot of basic interaction, a self service is going to be the future. Think about a basic chat bot or a intelligent agent, being able to handle maybe 80%. But that human is always going to need to be there for that 20% or to be able to jump in for the really tricky stuff. So again, I think it's going to be bots plus humans will ultimately be the winning formula.
Great. I want to pivot towards Evan and away from kind of the industry and sales. Um, so you were a salesperson or sales associate for a bunch of companies, and then at some point you decided to venture out on your own. Can you talk through how that process went about?
Yeah, so I was selling and typical roles, whether direct or partners or biz dev alliances. And then this thing called social media came along, whether it was Twitter in the beginning, but then LinkedIn. And I soon realized that what a better way to network and to develop relationships and open doors versus a traditional in-person events or the telephone. The old white pages. There really wasn't a platform like that in for much of the 80s and 90s. But when the social networking came along, it was a chance to sort of do your research, to identify and learn about an individual before you met, to use it to open doors. And sort of the phenomenon of social selling was born, where you're combining social networking with traditional sales tactics. And I think most salespeople now use social, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn, to sort of network with prospects, to get prospects to contact them based on content, to catch people's attention, to drive people to events or to meetings or meetups or other in-person activities. So selling has really changed pretty radically.
It's funny hearing your experience when social first came on because I was in a much different period of my life. I was in college, so I was using it primarily to post pictures and try to stay out of trouble as best I could. Did you inherently just look at social through the lens of your career and think, how can I leverage this? Was it obvious right out of the gate?
It wasn't obvious out of the gate, but it was obvious it was really compelling and attention getting and intriguing. And I think people are just waking up to that now, that the deeper you sort of peel back the onion, the more ways that you can imagine using social media and all its forms to engage with the marketplace and share ideas and develop business opportunities. And new platforms are constantly evolving, springing up, whether it's like Reddit or Quora or Nextdoor or pick your platform. And so each of those presents unique opportunities for sales and marketing and business people. And so it was definitely an evolution.
where do you stand on what social platforms you should be on? Do you think about it in terms of what your job is or what your purpose for using them is, and then be selective, or are you of the opinion that everyone should be on every platform?
Well, certainly people like myself who are practitioners of marketing and digital should look at every platform as a unique opportunity. I think most people should pick one, two, three platforms to focus on because you only have so much time in the day. But each community is unique and different and has its unique opportunities, challenges, caveats, and wrinkles, etc. So it really is a matter of getting your hands dirty, rolling up your sleeves and trying these things out and seeing what works for you. I know people who've made business doing business to business on Facebook, which isn't known for a B2B platform, but with 2 billion people on Facebook, there are ways to monetize that too. So it really depends on your goals, objectives, and experience. What kind of content are you creating, and how can you target that towards a very specific audience?
Yeah, I like what you said earlier about encouraging people to put content out. I've kind of evolved into that. I started just watching and I quickly realized you can't just be a participant if you want to grow your presence online. You really have to pick a niche and find a way to communicate something unique. What advice would you give someone if they're just starting and maybe like someone fresh out of college still trying to figure it out? Would you kind of tread lightly and just kind of dip your toe in the water, or should you just try to go in and figure it out along the way?
I would say the key is like most things, listening and learning. In social, it means social listening. Tracking the top 10 conversations or topics you're interested in, staying on top of those keywords and hashtags, and listening to who's who in the zoo and engaging. These are water cooler style conversations, and whether you have 10 followers or 10,000, you can still participate in the conversations and add your 2 cents, add some value, and get to know, the community that's out there. And over time, like anything else, you'll develop relationships and followers and insights. But listening and learning to start, I think, is key versus getting out there and sort of broadcasting to the world. So I think patience too is the other thing. I've been tweeting and posting and blogging for 10 plus, almost 12 years, and I can say there's no silver bullet. There's no one tactic or technique that's gonna open the floodgates. It really is just experimenting and being patient.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point to underscore because I'm sure you know, and plenty of other people know, there's techniques where you can inflate your followers, but I went down that path and quickly realized, why am I doing this? I don't need to. I want to grow a community. I want to grow people that I can connect with, not just a bunch of bots that make my numbers look good.
Yeah, and it's a cheap thrill,
Yeah, it is.
but it doesn't do anything in terms of your engagement, your footprint, or your learning. And ultimately, it's a fool's errand. And I think it's pretty clear who's playing that game and who's not. Frankly, someone who has an intelligent observation or insight with 10 followers gets more of my attention than someone with zero to give who has a million followers. So I see that all the time, actually. So the key is to be a participant and don't just sort of mail it in.
Yeah, and it's okay if you only have 20 followers. I mean, everyone started there and grew it up over time. I think that's another point to underscore. And don't feel I knew I felt that initially when I started to get into LinkedIn and some of the other platforms where I was like, I don't have that many followers. Why put out content? But that's the only way to grow into it being something at some point down in the future.
Yeah, and you can ride on top of other people's content. I mean, I do have a podcast, but frankly, I go on one or two podcasts a day like yours, and right on top of what other folks are creating and doing, and that applies to podcasts or Twitter chats or in-person events. I mean, you can participate and add value without having a lot of followers because it's based on your what you share and your comments and color commentary and insights, and you will get noticed. Trust me, it's not that hard to be seen and heard these
Yeah,
days.
especially if you're unique. So, so I want to go back to the company that you and Irma started. Can you give us the kind of the background of how that came to be and what the purpose behind the company is?
Yeah, so Irma and I started EvIRA Health with a view towards taking our industry background and personal obsessions with social and digital, but also health care and health technology to clients. And we have a who's who of clients from big brand, blue chip brands right through to early stage innovative startups, and we're helping them get seen and heard across the social media landscape, and in the process creating content and driving engagement and visibility and reach, whether it's sort of day to day on social media or at big events like HIMSS or CES. So we're kind of an extension of our client's own internal social digital team, helping what is tough these days, which is to get noticed and to get seen by an audience that includes not just end users, but analysts and journalists and media and press and the rest of who's who on social media these days.
Yeah, and I saw everywhere I looked, you mentioned storytelling. Is that the best way to cut through the noise and get noticed, like you mentioned?
Yeah, it's either telling your story in a fun and entertaining, interesting way, or it's what you're doing, interviewing and learning about other people's stories and asking questions and creating content around those stories. Storytelling is kind of as old as time, and people are attracted to new and interesting stories. And whether you do that in written word or spoken word or video word or live streaming, really it could be any of the above.
Is a big part of your role as in helping these companies just teaching the platforms, or have we moved beyond that where everyone kind of has a comfort level with the platforms and it's figuring out the nuances?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, really, no one has a comfort level with these platforms. I mean,
Okay.
they're constantly changing and evolving, and the algorithms are pretty opaque, and there are new features being introduced, and it's a frankly, it's a bit of a mess. The apps are can be confusing, particularly if you're a busy manager or executive. You don't have time to invest in these platforms like I would do 12 hours a day. And so, yeah, there's a lot of consultation, help, and frankly, time that's needed to invest that people don't have. Even big companies, you think like an Intel as a client, uh, they work with analysts and influencers and others to help bring audiences to their events and news and announcements. And you get much better engagement, frankly, with organic kind of digital social reach than you would through even paid ads or paid social. So it brings bringing audiences to the news is kind of the new way of doing marketing.
Yeah, they trick you thinking it's not news, but it actually is news. So what does a typical engagement look like for you guys? And how much variance is there between some of the bigger companies and some of the startups, newer companies that you work with?
Yeah, so it could be everything from live tweeting and live blogging and streaming and posting at an event like CES or HIMSS to help people at the event kind of get their message across, or even maybe who aren't at the event who are interested in the topics and themes to get a peek at what's happening at the event through live audio and video and text. Or it could be just day to day content. These conversations happen 24/7. And so there's a need for a kind of drumbeat, a cadence of posts and tweets and chats, and we help clients with that. And we do it to have fun as well. I mean, we're I think we're both obsessed with these platforms, and it's not just educational; it's entertaining. You sort of like the word edutainment, and it's quite addictive for better or worse. And so we're helping clients with all the above.
Yeah. How much importance do you place on analytics? Because I know you can get a ton of data from the posts and content you put out. Do you use that as kind of a foundational point to assess things?
Yeah, analytics is key. The beauty of social and digital is very data driven, and through their internal analytics reporting and through third party tools, you can get a real feeling for what works, what doesn't work, what engagement looks like, website clicks, and it's all very trackable. So there's no excuse for putting out content that doesn't perform, and there's no excuse for frankly not succeeding. You can really measure what's winning and what's losing, and adjust accordingly, which in the old days of advertising through billboards or newspaper ads was never the case. It was sort of fire and forget, or fire and regret, and cross your fingers. Whereas these days everything is data driven.
Yeah, and do you find companies use social to almost put out feelers and kind of get a preemptive pulse on how things are going to be received?
Yeah, a lot of times they do. I mean, I have clients who do things like Twitter polls, questions of the day, soliciting feedback, not just publicly but privately through direct messaging. You can have sort of one-on-one private group conversations. And what a better way to get really intimate with not just customers, but partners or analysts or the journalists out there in ways that you couldn't do through traditional media.
And how do you balance kind of the how do you balance the analytics you get back? You can't put all your stock into that, right? Because I find especially Twitter is a good one, I think, where the reality of how people engage in real life versus how they engage in Twitter, there's a pretty sizable disconnect. How do you go about just making sense of what's real and what's not?
Part of it's experience. I think it's a matter of trying different platforms, different tools, measuring them against your real world, let's say, expectation or experience, and using multiple tools to maybe benchmark each of the tools, and always. Frankly, my marketing tech stack is constantly evolving. I'm always looking at new tools and platforms that might be relevant or interesting. Of course, the APIs on these social platforms are always evolving, and so it's a matter of looking at what data you can extract, which changes over time. LinkedIn, you get very little, for example. And so, yeah, there's unfortunately no simple easy button or easy answer for a lot of this stuff.
All right, this is the question of the day. Are you on TikTok?
I'm watching TikTok. I find it fascinating. TikTok has a great search engine, so I like to go in and see, well, on technology topics, what are people sharing? What are they curating? What gets traction? 99% of TikTok is kind of where Instagram was a few years ago, just music videos and silly stuff. But as the platform grows and matures, it's going to be leveraged by B2B tech brands. And so it's worth understanding how it works, the ins and outs, and preparing yourself to that point where, yes, I will do a TikTok video. So like right now it's in that nascent phase, but this is how these platforms work. And Reddit was the same way 3 years ago, and Instagram was 5 years ago. They all sort of grow up and mature over time, and when they hit, you kind of have to be prepared as a marketeer to take advantage of it.
Yeah, TikTok's interesting because it's the first platform that's starting to tick up where I'm outside the demographic that probably is on there, and I'm feel like I'm not exactly invited to the party, but I'm like you. I'm watching it closely and hoping I can still fit in and blend in and not stand out like a sore thumb. But it,
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, great talking to you, and really, I appreciate what you do, and I look forward to kind of keeping in touch on social as your show grows over time.
yeah, thanks so much. This was super enlightening, and thanks for letting me peg you with questions all over the place. I think you gave a ton of practical advice on it, both for personal and professional use of social, and I think it's so relevant because it's in a lot of ways it's a new frontier for people. They know the platforms, but they don't necessarily know the right way to engage. So I think this will be great for all the listeners, and really appreciate you taking the time.
Appreciate you having me. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Evan. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Talk to you later.